Mariela Sanchez. When I was in high school, I had the privilege of studying abroad in Spain. I can remember that I was so excited to explore the differences of another culture. However, when I went to the hotel to meet the male tour guide for the very first time, I can remember that something out of the ordinary occurred. When I graciously extended my hand to greet the male tour guide, I can recall that he extended his hand as well, except he leaned in closer and physically touched his cheek to my cheek while making a kissing sound. I was in utter shock. I was uncomfortable. However, as I stood frozen in shock, I realized that the tour guide was greeting the other students the exact same way. Apparently, this form of physical touch in terms of greeting was considered normal to this culture. I then began to wonder, why was this culture so comfortable with physical touch? As an American, I was not comfortable with this type of physical touch, especially not from a male. In this speech, we'll analyze how some cultures are more comfortable with physical touch versus other cultures. We will do this by analyzing the way these cultures greet each other. We will also determine if sex affects this comfort level. We will explore the greeting styles of 3 different cultures. These cultures will include the Spaniard culture, the American culture, and the Muslim culture. Based on the way the Spaniards greet one another, one can determine that the Spaniards are very comfortable with physical touch, regardless of sex. As I talked about earlier, when I greeted the male tour guide for the very first time, he physically touched his cheek to my cheek while making a kissing sound. According to the Babylonian and Idiomas website, this type of physical touch is called besitos. In this besito type greeting, 2 individuals graciously extend each other's hand, lean in closely, physically touch each other's cheek, and make a kissing sound. The website also goes on to determine that this type of greeting style is the universal greeting style. Men greet men with besitos, women greet women with besitos, and men and women greet each other with besitos. As a result, sex does not affect this comfort of physical touch. Now that we know how the Spaniards greet one another, let us determine how the American culture greets one another. The American culture is somewhat comfortable with physical touch, but the gender does not affect this comfort level of physical touch. The universal physical touch greeting style of the Americans is the handshake. In the handshake, 2 individuals extend each other's hand and graciously shake each other while they give a tight, firm squeeze with the hand. In this greeting style, sex also is not a factor. For in the handshake, men greet men with handshake, women greet women with handshakes, and men and women greet each other with a handshake. As a result, the Americans are comfortable with physical touch to a certain extent, not as much as the Spaniards. However, like the Spaniards, sex does not affect this type of physical touch comfort level. Now that we determine how the Spaniards and the Americans greet each other, let us compare that to how the Muslim culture greets one another. In the Muslim culture, the handshake is also another form of physical touch. However, in the Muslim greeting style, sex is a major factor. According to the Michigan School State of Journalism, in 100 questions and answers about Muslim Americans, men greet men with handshakes, women greet women with handshakes. However, men and women do not greet each other with handshakes because this type of touch is forbidden. The book also goes on to say that it is forbidden and against the Muslim teaching for a woman and a man who are not physically related to touch each other physically. As a result, one can conclude that the Muslim culture is somewhat comfortable with physical touch. However, sex does have a major impact on this comfort level of physical touch. So, in conclusion, we have evaluated 3 cultures' greeting styles. We evaluated the Spaniard culture, the American culture, and the Muslim culture. Based on these conclusions, one can conclude that the Spaniard culture is very comfortable with physical touch, and sex has no effect on this comfort level. The American culture is somewhat comfortable with physical touch, and sex has no factor on this comfort level. The Muslim culture, like the American culture, is somewhat comfortable with physical touch as well. However, in the Muslim culture, sex does have a major factor on this physical touch comfort level. I personally believe that We should know of the physical greetings, the physical touch greetings of these cultures in order to avoid culture shock and in order to avoid any awkward situations. Thank you for listening to my speech today. Thank you.